And I'll be the first to admit that this is very new for us. It's certainly new for me as far as celebrating the new year, biblical new year. Last year, we did our first New Year celebration, and it came on the heels of Shemitah, which was the year of release, and the year the land was to rest. And it just so happened that that was also the year that individuals are commanded to forgive debts. And what I have come to realize in my own personal walk is that the more I learn of him, and this is what Yeshua invited us to when he said, "Come to me, those of you who are heavy laden." Or he says, "Come to me, those of you who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Rest for your what? For your soul. Rest for your soul. He says, "Learn of me, take my yoke upon you and learn of me." And then he says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And what that tells me is that, as we learn of him, there's a lot of things that I've learned that I didn't know. And there are things that I'm learning that I still, I'm constantly realizing how much I didn't know. And as I'm learning these things, it's like, how do I apply them? There are things that I read in the Bible that I can't necessarily find a particular application for, and this biblical New Year is one of those things. We know, according to Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 1, the Bible says, "Observe the month of Abib." And one of the questions that I had with that is, okay, is that something that we're supposed to do all month? Is it something that we're supposed to do at specific times of month? But I know here's what I've been doing, that in observing the month of the Abib, it's a matter of looking for the new moon and then beginning to count up to Passover. But then this other part of the verse, it kind of threw me. Says, "Observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover." And so there's something that says to me that the Passover is part of the month of the Abib that we are supposed to keep, but the month itself. And as I read, there are specific things that take place within the tabernacle and within the temple during the beginning of the month. And yet, how do I, not being a Levite, how do the community, and that's where it gets a little gray, if I could say that, when it comes down to the application of it. "For in the month of Abib, the Lord thy Elohim brought thee forth out of Egypt by night." And so we'll get into that as we get into Passover, because we know that it was during the Passover that YeHoVaH brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt by night. But this is before we get to Passover, because there were certain instructions that the Almighty gave to the children of Israel. First, we see that the new year was instituted by YeHoVaH. It's not something that man introduced. It was the Almighty himself when he said in Exodus chapter 12, "And YeHoVaH spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt." So he's speaking to them in the land of Egypt, saying, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months." Now, every one of us here know that this was not the beginning of months as far as creation is concerned. And we also can look back and see that the word month, Kodesh, was used several times prior. As a matter of fact, the Bible lets us know that during Noah's life, on the first day of the month is when the water receded. But the month was not named then, and it has a different word than what we find here. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Now, the new year was called the first month. That's what it was called. Didn't have a name. The name Abib is the condition of barley. And this is how we know what we're dealing with. Abib here, the word, and it's got Canaanite origin, even though it's considered a Hebrew word. You'll find that many of the words in the Bible have origins that may not necessarily be where we think they're from. Abib means fresh, young barley ears. It's barley. And the barley becomes Abib at a certain time of year. And this, I believe the Almighty was saying, this is how you're going to know the first month of the Abib is when the barley, the young barley ears form. It is the month that the ears of barley form, of greening of crop, of growing green. Abib, it's month. It later became the month of Exodus and Passover. Now, the word Abib is used as the word Abib in the ear, and then green ears of corn. And this is how we know. See, people ask, well, why do you look at the barley? What's the barley got to do with anything? Well, the barley has everything to do with the observation, because the observation is focused on barley. That's what Abib means. And the month is based on the new moon. And that's what you'll find in this particular verse. The month Abib is the month the barley is forming in the ear. Abib is always associated with barley. It's not associated with wheat. The wheat harvest comes later. And when we look at Exodus, I believe, chapter 9, we see that there was some things taking place in the chapter, whereas when Moses was dealing with Pharaoh, that the barley became, it was affected by the wind. It was affected by the hail, the storm. It was affected, whereas the wheat had not yet grown. And you'll read that in Exodus chapter number 9. Abib became known as the first month of the year. Now, I want to go back here, and all you have to do, ladies and gentlemen, if you go to get a Strong's Concordance, you will find here that in Exodus chapter 12, verse number 2, beginning, and this is how we get the term Rosh Chodesh. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. The beginning of months. It shall be, Rosh Hashanah. It shall be the first month of the year. And if you look up that word year, what word do you think you'll come up with? Hello? Well, ha means the. Shana is what? Year. And the beginning of years, the first month we find is Rosh Hashanah, meaning beginning. So it's the beginning of months, or the beginning month of the year. And this is where Rosh Hashanah comes, the head of the year, the beginning of the year. Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year. Understand this. Rosh Hashanah means the beginning of the year. Now, there are some who celebrate Rosh Hashanah in the 7th month. How many of you know that the 7th month is not the beginning of the year? But yet, it doesn't stop people from celebrating the new year in the 7th month when the new year is supposed to be observed in the 1st month. And the reason why I felt compelled to start celebrating the biblical new year is to actually begin to establish a standard that would now bring the 7th month under the microscope. Because as long as we ignore the biblical new year, the unbiblical new year will continue to be celebrated without any form of opposition from anybody. Are you hearing me? It's not enough to say that's not the new year when by celebrating the new year in its proper time, we're taking a stand and saying, listen, we're not just saying that's not the new year. We're going to observe the new year at the right time, just as we go out of our way to observe the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread and first fruits. And I know over the years, people have gotten really, really upset. To say it differently would be untrue. When one person celebrates the feast of the first fruits a different day than the other person celebrates first fruit, because of course first fruit determines Pentecost or Feast of Weeks or Feast of Harvest, but Rosh Hashanah determines determines Passover and unleavened bread and first fruits and Pentecost. Because if you ignore the beginning of the year, and most people who follow the Jewish calendar aren't concerned about when the beginning of the year is, because the Jewish calendar has already been set. And people put on the calendar last year after Passover and started making preparations for the next Passover this year, last year, setting in stone a date because the date has already been set. And so when people follow the Jewish year, the Jewish New Year, they make a big deal out of the 7th month, Rosh Hashanah, when it's actually Yom Teruah. But we won't deal with that right now. Abib became known as the 1st month of the year because of the barley forming. Later, after the exile in Babylon, Abib was replaced with the Babylonian name Nisan. Thought I'd fix that. In the 1st month, that is the month Nisan, and we find this in Esther. In the 1st month, that is the month Nisan. Now, by the time you get to Esther, Israel have gone into exile. They are now in Babylon. And so in Babylon, they use the Babylonian name for the 1st month here in Esther 3:7. The 1st month, that is the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day. And so here you find individuals casting lot before Haman, a Babylonian. Now, pur is where the word Purim comes from. And Purim was established where? In Babylon. Now, the two major celebrations, I'm talking about where the secular Jew as well as the religious Jew celebrate equally, and that is Purim and Hanukkah. Those two which aren't biblical feasts at all. And yet they're celebrated in a manner more exuberantly than the biblical feasts. In the month Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot before Haman from day to day and from month to month, to see to the 12th month, that is the month Adar. Now, when the children of Israel came out of Babylon, they brought with them many of the traditions they practiced in Babylon, with them including the Babylonian names of months, and then Purim, Judaism, and most likely the celebration of the new year in the 7th month. No one knows when Judaism actually started celebrating the new year in the 7th month, but this is clear. By the time the Mishnah, or the Oratorah as it is known, was published in the 2nd century, the rules concerning the 7th month New Year celebration was well established. And so we can trace the 7th month celebration of Rosh Hashanah all the way back to the Mishnah. And the Mishnah was the oral Torah. Now, Yeshua came face to face with the oral Torah in his day, and it's what got him killed. People are serious about their oral Torah. Messianics today practice more oral Torah than Torah itself, you see. And with it comes the traditions, and the traditions is, I believe, what caused the believers in Yeshua, especially when more and more Gentiles came along. See, what was happening was a mixture of traditions with the word itself. And the purist, or the people who only wanted the word, wanted just the word, not all that tradition. And in order to walk in the word without the tradition, they had to separate themselves from the people who mixed the tradition with the word. And this breach became larger and larger until the followers of Messiah became predominantly non-Hebrew people. The Mishnah identify 4 New Years. And see, here's where part of that confusion, because if you can inject confusion into the mix, then people don't know what to believe, and they're looking to somebody to tell them. And this is how the people, I believe, got moved from the truth of the gospel, that which was given to them by YeHoVaH, and became dependent on men. Because see, all you got to do is infuse confusion. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, even in our day, it's like you don't know what's real news from fake news. It's very difficult to distinguish the truth from the other truths, and it's all dependent on who you listen to. But that's in the secular world. Let's just take a look at the churches and the Messianics, because you've got the Baptist truth, you've got the Pentecostal truth, you've got the Methodist truth, you've got the Presbyterian truth, you got all of these different truths. And I can hear the frustration in people when they say, well, what denomination is the right one? And once they get a clue as to what denomination may be the right one, now they want to know, well, what Bible is the right Bible? Which Bible should we be reading from? You see. And so you got all of this confusion to where people say, you know what? You know, you throw your hands up in the air. But we don't have to do that. And one of the great sources of confusion was this oral Torah that was communicated right alongside the Torah itself. And with the oral Torah, you got a mixture of voices that now compete against the voice of YeHoVaH. And this is what is going on. The Mishnah identifies 4 new years. How many new years does the Bible identify? 1. So now you got 4 new years according to Jewish tradition, whereas the Bible only have 1. According to the Mishnah, Rosh Hashanah, according to Mishnah, Rosh Hashanah 1 verse 1, or chapter 1 verse 1, or however you want to allocate it, the 4 new years are: 1, on the 1st of Nisan, the new year for the kings and for the festivals. Okay? That's the first one. The second one, on the 1st of Elul, the new year for the tithing of animals. And this came from this guy they called Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon. They say on the 1st of Tishrei. So you got the new year for the tithing of animals. And then you got on the 1st of Tishrei, the new year for years. The new year for years. So the new year for years is the beginning of the year, according to the Talmud, according to the Mishnah. This is what is written in here. And I gave you the reference for those of you who are curious. And so you got the new year for years, for the sabbatical years, and for the jubilee years, and for the planting, and for the vegetables. And then the 4th year, the 4th new year, is on the 1st of Shevat, the new year for the trees, according to the words of the house of Shema. The house of Hillel says on the 15th thereof. So you got 2 houses competing. You got 4 new years. And so the people are dumbfounded, and depending on what rabbi they follow will determine what cycle they follow, just as the Torah portion cycles is dependent on what house they follow. And all of this is man-made. But it's introduced in the body of Messiah as if it's something, and then, you know, people who come to the conclusion, well, it's man-made, but I still like it. I like it because, you know, it helps me stay on track. The traditions help me stay on track. Well, you know, you can establish traditions that are based on the word that can help you stay on track. You don't need man-made traditions to help you stay on track. But some people, that's their excuse to say, I'm going to follow this. I don't care what you say. I'm going to follow this. I mean, it's like, who you, bruh? You barely 50, you barely 60 years old. You know, these sages have been around long time. They got a lot more wisdom than you got. And it's like, you know what? That's exactly what they said about Yeshua. It's like, man, you know, who are you? And they said before Abraham, I was. It just messed him up. You see, ladies and gentlemen, the wisdom that we have comes from above. Don't ever allow someone to exalt the wisdom of men above the wisdom of YeHoVaH, which comes directly to you from above. If you are in tune, have ears to hear and eyes to see. And so, we don't follow the Mishnah, we don't follow the Gemara, and we don't follow the Talmud. Now, the Mishnah and the Gemara is the Talmud. We don't follow any of that. Well, why don't you, brother? There's a lot of wisdom there. Well, you know, there's wisdom in following Yeshua. And here's the thing about following Yeshua and his wisdom. If I follow Yeshua and his wisdom, I won't be duped by men. You see, I can't get duped by men if I follow him. because there were people around that people were following before he came. You see. And when he came, he was a threat to them. But the people knew. And yet, some people were afraid to follow him because they didn't want to be put out the synagogues. They didn't want to be alienated from their families. When you've put your entire life in a religious system, when you deal with a person, and this is why I know when I'm dealing with the person who's been in church all their lives, people who've been in church all their lives feel that they need to fellowship with other warm bodies in order to be part of a community. I mean, that's the way you feel. And you know, being in a rural place, at least, you know, I have people say, well, I just want fellowship. So they want to go to the church on Sunday. And then they go to the church on Sunday and leave mad Sunday after Sunday. Because, you know, even the songs, there are many songs that are they're jacked up. I don't know how else to say it. These songs, they are perpetuating a false teaching. You see. We follow Yeshua, ladies and gentlemen, sometime between the Torah and the codification of the Mishnah. The autumn new year gained ascendance, now transformed into a major celebration, and the Nisan new year was left as a marker of the months and festivals in the calendar year. Now, Nisan means nothing. It's the name of a month. This month, Nisan, was called Nisan when the children of Israel was taken into captivity in Babylon. So when you see people talk about the month Nisan, they're not associating it with Abib. And that's part of disconnecting people from the things that are biblical, is you change the name. If you give something a different name, then it takes on a new definition. Now, I went on I was a little surprised, but I shouldn't have been surprised. I went on I'll tell you here in a minute, because seeing for some folks is believing, and I just wanted to show them so they didn't have to take my word for it. Now, can you put that up? This is dictionary.com. Dictionary.com, ladies and gentlemen. And I typed in Abib. And look at what it says. The 7th month of the Jewish year. That's what it says. Must be right. It's in dictionary.com. Now, people who are using dictionary.com as their resource for studying the Bible and don't have a concordance because they're too cheap. I mean, a concordance costs $20. And you got every word in the Bible in there that you can research and search for yourself. It's a very small investment for an individual's library. So you're not dependent, because anytime you go on a Western dictionary or go into a Western dictionary or you go into an encyclopedia, you're going to get a Western definition. You cannot use Western definitions for biblical words. Otherwise, you end up with Abib being in the 7th month when clearly the Bible says it's the 1st month. So who's right? And there are a lot of this. There's a lot of this scattered all over the place. It's just that I felt this one I just had to show. Are you hearing me? Because it's like I want to call dictionary.com and say, what's wrong with you people? Where you getting your definitions from? The source. See, and this is the thing. If the source is wrong and you follow the source, guess what that make you? Makes you wrong. Although theories abound about the causes of this transition, the mechanics are lost in the web of historical change. You see, this is the thing. When people start changing stuff, this is why when we get into the evolution, I particularly use that word evolution because it is an evolving, is a change that has taken place from the beginning of the institution of even the gospel, ladies and gentlemen. By the time, I mean, think about this for a moment. When people think of the gospel, get this, and all of you can identify with this. There is the gospel of Matthew. There's the gospel of Luke. There's the gospel of Mark. There's the gospel of John. There's the gospel of Yeshua. So whose gospel is right? Are you hearing me? See, gospel has been taken and mean a writing by a particular person, which is a gospel. And so if I write a version of the gospel, I can give it whatever name I want. The gospel of Arthur, which is based on my knowledge and understanding of Yeshua. And if I write a gospel of Arthur and people read it and it catches on and it sells many, many copies, or I, give away a couple of 100,000 so I can get on the bestsellers list. And next thing you know, like the King James, it becomes acceptable reading. 100 years from now, if Yeshua tarries, 200 years from now, when they begin to rewrite the Bible again. Because let me tell you something, folks. Make no mistake about it. 200 years from now, the gospel, the Bible, is going to look totally different than the Bible today. By the time the world gets done, by the time these changes that are taking place gets done, get finished, you're not going to know if YeHoVaH is a he or a she. You're really not. Or it. Just whatever you feel comfortable with. It's like the bathroom. Whatever bathroom you feel comfortable using, if you identify with that, then just use that one. You get this? This is where the world is headed. This is where it's going. And so this book is evolving, but it's already evolved. What we got today and what the disciples followed is two different books. And this is why I make a issue out of the 1611 King James Bible that was put together by men supposedly under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, who believed, based on the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, that all of those books belonged in the Bible. And then a couple of 100 years later, other men under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit decided by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that those books didn't belong and took them out. So in a matter of a couple of 100 years, the Bible has evolved. And it's continuing. Because back then, you may had the Wesleyan Bible, the Thompson Bible, King James Bible, but now you got hundreds and hundreds of versions of the Bible. We know that during the days of Yeshua, the rabbis' usage of the oral Torah was prominent. Yeshua referred to the oral Torah as traditions that made the Torah of YeHoVaH no effect. Then came together unto him the Pharisees and certain of the scribes which came from Jerusalem, and when they saw some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, and that defiled, they weren't clean as far as their hands. See, and they said these men were defiled because they say with unwashed hands they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they washed their hands oft. Now, I thought that, that word, when I first saw oft, I thought, okay, that's short for what? Often. But I read it, it's like that word also, it signifies that it's not just washing their hands, but they had to wash their hands all the way up to their elbows. Right? So it's not just washing your hands, and now, there's the two-handled cup where you pour, but this is some serious washing. And they could observe, because if they wash their hands before they eat, these guys, they're just eating with dirty hands, and therefore they were saying they were defiled. And therefore, if they're eating something that is with dirty hands, they're eating something that's unclean. They're eating with defiled hands, and whatever defiled hands touch, it defiles, and they're putting that defiled stuff in their mouth. And that's what Yeshua was talking about. It's not what goes in a man that defiles him. Dealing with this issue with eating with dirty hands. And he says, except they wash hands off, eat, not holding the traditions of the elders. So these guys are eating, and they're not eating according to how the elders say you should eat. And when they come from the market, except they wash, they don't eat. And many other things. Now you talk about germaphobes. This is some serious issues, ladies and gentlemen. And I can understand that you're getting stuff from the market and you're touching all kinds of stuff and you're coming in contact with, stuff, dirt and stuff like that. It said that except they wash their hands, they don't eat. And many other things there be. Now that's just one thing, but there's many other things they do, which they have received to hold as a washing of cups and pots, brazen vessels, and of tables. Then the Pharisees, and I believe this is where cleanliness is next to godliness come from, which is not in the Bible. For the Pharisees and all the Jews, except they wash their hands often, going backwards here. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, why walk not thy disciples according to the traditions of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands? He answered and said unto them, well saith Isaiah prophesied of you, hypocrites, as it is written, this people honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Howbeit in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. You see, the problem that Yeshua had with the Pharisees is, because some people say, well, the Pharisees, these guys was righteous men. Well, if you hold to the Torah, if you change one letter of the Torah, you destroy it. If you add something to it or take something away, what are you saying? The perfect one who gave it perfectly. The perfect one who gave it perfectly. To add something to it is to say that it wasn't perfect. We're going to make it better. To take something away from it is to say, we're going to make it better. But what do? When you take something away from it or add something to it, it's no longer his word. It becomes theirs. And this is what the Almighty was saying. Don't add to it. Don't take away from it. It's perfect, just as it is. For laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the traditions of men, as the washing of pots and cups and many other such things you do. And he said unto them in Mark. Now, we looked at, let me go back to Mark. Mark 9. And he said unto them, full well, you reject the commandment of Elohim, that you may keep your own traditions. You reject the commandments of Elohim, that you may keep your own traditions. Now, the thing about the Pharisees is that their traditions was mixed in with the word. The word and tradition was all one. But ignorant and unlearned men who's looking at this come to the conclusion that what Yeshua was doing by doing these things is he was saying, see, he didn't keep the law. Well, they weren't keeping the law. They were keeping the traditions as though they were commandments and were teaching those traditions as commandments. For the followers of Messiah, we follow the instructions that are written. YeHoVaH commands us to observe his commandments. We are under no kingdom requirement to follow traditions, and any tradition that nullifies YeHoVaH's commands should be shunned. And this is one of the reasons why I'm very particular about, traditions, because even in the practice, the moment you start practicing traditions, people begin to see, well, is that the way you do it? Now, here's a few other verses on Abib, and then we'll bring this to a close. Exodus 13:4. This day came you out in the month where Abib, and it shall be when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. Exodus 23:14. 3 times thou shalt keep a feast unto me in the year. Thou shalt keep the feast of unleavened bread. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded thee, in the time appointed of the month Abib. For in it thou camest out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty. Exodus 34:18. The feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep 7 days. Thou shalt eat unleavened bread, as I commanded thee, in the time of the month Abib. For in the month Abib thou camest out from Egypt. Now, it is unclear how the new year or new moon is to be celebrated, but it is clear it is to be observed. And so, we're not here. Today is not a Sabbath day. Today is not a holy convocation that is commanded. It is a holy convocation in the sense that we've assembled together and we are holy, presenting ourselves before the Holy One, but it's not a commanded convocation. So if somebody didn't want to be here tonight, they didn't have to. But here's the thing, that we are supposed to observe the month. And what that looked like is not clear. You see. So again, back to Deuteronomy. Observe, that word shamar, it means to keep. To keep the month of Abib and keep the Passover unto YeHoVaH thy Elohim. For in the month of Abib, YeHoVaH thy Elohim brought thee forth out of Egypt by night. And that's it. That's it. So at this particular point, now that's one of the shortest teachings I've done. That was short. Shalom, saints. Tithing and giving first fruit offerings are critical parts of the believer's faith and has its foundation back in Genesis 4:4, when Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And YeHoVaH had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Abel was commended by YeHoVaH in Hebrews 11:4, where it states that by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. Solomon said in Proverbs 3:9 and 10, honor YeHoVaH with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. The prophet Malachi wrote in chapter 3, verse 11 and 12, to bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, says YeHoVaH of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there should not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, says YeHoVaH of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a delightsome land, saith YeHoVaH of hosts. When we tithe and give offerings consistently in obedience to YeHoVaH's commandments, we can count on him to keep his promises to us and consistently meet all of our needs. It is our Father's desire to bless you. However, it begins with you and your act of obedience to tithe and give offerings. Do it today. Shalom.
For more information, visit www.arthurbaileyministries.com or call 888-899-1479. This program is made possible through financial contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.